Welcome to the brand new SIGA Wow Show, Women on Wednesdays. Brought to you by SIGA, the world's leading organisation for sports integrity. On the first Wednesday of every month, SIGA will showcase thought leadership initiatives spearheaded by female executives, senior industry leaders, sportswomen and influencers who will address, from a female lens, the most critical integrity challenges facing contemporary sports. This second episode shines a spotlight on inspirational senior executives in international women's football. Nadine Kessler, Chief of Women's Football Unit and Divisional Football at UEFA. Sarai Behrman, Chief Women's Football Officer, Women's Football Division at FIFA. And Sarah Gregorius, Director Global Policy and Strategic Relations, Women's Football at FIFPro. Presented by SIGA's Global Chief Operating Officer and Managing Director of SIGAWOMEN Global Mentorship Programme, Katie Simmonds. Stay tuned as our guests discuss their career journeys, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, integrity issues at the heart of women's football, and so much more. Don't miss our giveaway question to win a pass to SoccerX Connected 100. We are ready for SIGA Wow. Katie, over to you.
Hello everyone, greetings to you all wherever you're watching in the world. And I know we've got a truly global audience for this second episode. Welcome to the second episode of SIGA Wow, Women on Wednesdays, the show dedicated to celebrate and empower women in sport. For our new viewers, my name's Katie Simmonds. I'm the Global COO of SIGA, and I'm Managing Director of the SIGA Women Mentorship Programme. Thank you for tuning in to our second episode. SIGA Wow is designed to be different. So if you're fed up of those static webinars, do not fear. On the first Wednesday of every month, we invite female leaders who are movers and shakers in sport to share their insights on how we can promote, celebrate, and ensure greater gender equity, both in the boardroom and on the field of play. This is thought leadership at its very best, with gift giveaways. We've got 3 with a new one just come in, interactive questions, and plenty of career tips. So grab a coffee or something stronger. It's midday somewhere in the world, and settle down with me for the next 60 minutes of SIGA Wow. And for this second episode, we have 3 inspiring and extraordinary female executives of global football. Nadine Kessler, Chief of Women's Football at UEFA. Sarai Behrman, Chief of Women's Football Officer at FIFA. And last but certainly not least, Sarah Gregorius, who's the newly appointed Director of Global Policy and International Relations at FIFPro. These women all have 2 things in common. They've played women's football and they are trailblazing the sport around the globe. As I mentioned, SIGA Women is designed to be interactive. So please send us your giveaway questions and your live chats. And I'm going to kick off with the first giveaway question, which is a chance to win a VIP pass to the SoccerX Connected 100 Digital Festival. And the question is, which birthday is SoccerX celebrating? And it's going to come up with a bit of magic from the studio. The answer's here. Is it A, 5 years, B, 10 years, or C, 25 years? And the first person to send the right answer in the live chat will win that pass. Stay tuned for 2 more giveaway questions, which is the chance to win a signed Barcelona kit, courtesy of UEFA. And they are the winners of the recent UEFA Women's Champions League. And also stay tuned for an exciting new giveaway question from Sarai Behrman at FIFA, which is the Real Madrid signed Kaka shirt. So without further delay, I think it's time to wow. So put your hands together, people, and make some noise for Sarai, Sarah, and Nadine. Welcome to Women on Wednesdays. And before we get to it, let's take a sneak peek of Nadine's playing career, and you will be wowed.
You're not like anyone, different from everyone. So I
Nadine, that video of you celebrating with your teammates, it puts a shiver down my spine. You've literally been lifting the trophy for women's football at such a young age. Tell us about your career, which has seen you winning on the pitch to now this leading position at UEFA.
Welcome. Hello, first of all, to everyone. Thank you, Katie, for having me. Yeah, I mean, some emotional pictures from my past, a past that I certainly miss now, despite my great job today. I think there's nothing better in the world to do than to be a professional athlete. I was lucky enough to, as you said, lift some trophies together with my team and yeah, make my dream, make my hobby become a profession. So that's unfortunately still a rarity for many female players, but I was one of the lucky ones, and yeah, very, very happy and proud also to have experienced this. And I guess also exactly this playing career is what led me really into also my new life, my new job, chief of football now at UEFA. Leading yeah, the strategic direction for European women's football, and equally as exciting and yeah, super passionate to be still involved with the game that I love, and in a way differently in the position to get back to the game that I love.
But to have made that career transition, Nadine, you're literally living the dream. I think it's what everyone, athlete wants to do, is to then play a leading role in spearheading their sport. How is women's football changing since when you played? And did you face barriers, and how did you overcome them?
Absolutely. I think there's not one area to single out where women's football changed the most. I think it's really across the board. Like, I'm not one of these people that always say, like, in my days, you know, our football was much better. No, of course not. I think those players would absolutely play me in the ground these days. So sportingly, physically, there was a huge development in recent years, but also the general perception of the game, the visibility, the acknowledgement, the respect it gets these days, the commercial interest from the investment side. It's really across the board, and it's rightfully deserved. And it also shows what the sport is able to, if it's given the right opportunity to develop. So huge from my playing days.
I'd love to bring Sarai from FIFA into the conversation now. Sarai, you're leading, you know, FIFA, Chief of Women's Football there. What's your biggest career challenge at the moment?
Oh, that's a tough question, Katie. And yeah, first of all, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity and for your massively enthusiastic welcome. It's good to have that level of motivation always, and especially around the topic of women's football. Look, I think for us, I mean, I can't talk about challenges without speaking a little bit about COVID-19. It's obviously something that everyone is having to deal with on some level. And like, you know, all other industries and the whole of society, it's impacted football as well. We saw, you know, obviously in the early stages of the pandemic, it had a big impact, not only for the women's game, but football more widely. And certainly for us, looking at how we can support our member associations, clubs, leagues, and ultimately players to come back from the pandemic in a strong way, and to see the women's game continue to grow, as we saw with the momentum that we had after the Women's World Cup in 2019. So that's, I would say, certainly one that's at the forefront for us. But perhaps on a more forward-looking note, obviously we're building up now to the Women's World Cup in 2023. It's going to be another major milestone for us. And I guess for us is, you know, getting that level of interest and really developing right across the globe, but specifically in Asia Pacific, a buzz around that. And I think with some major international tournaments coming up, that's going to help us a lot. You know, we've got the Olympics just around the corner. Next year, we've got the Women's Euro. So there's going to be a really nice build into the Women's World Cup. And I think it's going to help us to get back that buzz that we all really want and that we saw post Women's World Cup in France.
Yeah, I think certainly the COVID-19 pandemic has presented a huge challenge, not just for women's sport, but all sport. And FIFA recently published a landmark report on the development and professionalisation of elite women's football. Where are we today? Can you give us some stats and some insights from that report?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, first of all, just to paint the picture, one of the things that we realised, certainly at a global level, is that there is a massive lack of data existing in the women's game, particularly at the elite level. And as our game grows and is evolving very, very fast, as I'm sure both Nadine and Sarah can attest to, it's important that we, as governing bodies, as decision makers, are able to make decisions that are based on concrete data, on facts, on understanding where our landscape is and what the best things that we can do in order to grow that landscape are. So reports like the benchmarking report that we released last week, it's a valuable tool, I think, for all stakeholders to really be able to make informed decisions based on information that is factual and really points to where the women's game is today. In terms of stats, I mean, there were some really interesting ones. The report is divided into several sections: sporting, governance, the financial side, fan engagement. And I can give you a few. I've got a few ready here. From a sporting side, for example, in 73% of leagues, and this isn't something that should come as a surprise, winning teams have on average higher player wages than all other teams in their league. And I know that's something I can see Sarah already smiling there. It clearly indicates that, you know, higher player wages certainly has a big impact on the sporting performance on the pitch. And it's something that clubs and leagues alike really need to start thinking about, and certainly as they look to grow the game coming out of this pandemic. Another quick one for you, Katie, and this time regarding coaches. In 65% of leagues, teams with the highest qualified coaches outperformed other teams. Now that to me seems like also a given. It's something that, you know, seems to make sense. But what we all working in the women's football knew as kind of intuition, we now have data to back that up. And in fact, you know, leagues that have a requirement in place for coaches to have a minimum of an A license, interestingly, the TV audiences for those leagues were significantly higher per match than those leagues that don't have a requirement in terms of coaching licenses. So this is the kind of data that we've been able to pull together from this report. We surveyed 30 women's leagues around the world and 282 clubs. And what it means is club owners, those in charge of leagues, our member associations, you know, our confederations can all use that data and it can support them in their key decision-making process.
And what is FIFA's rationale behind the expansion of the women's game? Has the men's game bubble burst?
Well, look, I mean, I would say in the amount of time that I've been working in the women's game, one of the things that really has struck me about it is the positive impact that it has. You know, obviously there's beautiful football that is played on the pitch. We have some incredible athletes, but wider than that, you know, FIFA has 211 member associations. And for me, what it's about is the impact that the game has on women and girls all over the world. You know, I started my football career in Samoa, a very small island in the Pacific, and that's where I fell in love with the game from a governance perspective, because I saw how the impact is so great on girls in remote villages, you know, being able to play football, having access to facilities, being part of a team. You know, it's such a heartwarming thing to see. And if that impact is happening, you know, at the level it is now, why shouldn't we try to expand it? Why shouldn't we try to grow it so that more women and girls are benefiting from that? I think women's game is definitely the biggest growth opportunity that we have to football. I think it's the biggest growth sport right now, right across the board. And, you know, off the pitch, the impacts that it can have are incredible, and we should totally use that. And I think as a governing body, FIFA, together with our MAs, our confederations, you know, it's our obligation to spread that positive impact.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'm going to bring Sarah from FIFPro into it, picking up on the player wages. You know, is it enough, Sarah, that what the female players are making to earn a decent living, and what sort of pressures are they under?
I think it definitely depends on what country or what league you're talking about, right? I mean, first of all, hello everyone, it's really nice to be here. But I think it really is contextual to the environment that they're playing in, because even if you look at the data that we've found over and analyzed over the last few years, even if you are looking at kind of this global idea of average salary, $2,500 in the US is very different to $2,500 in Gabon, for example. It means something different depending on the context that the player is playing in. I guess what you would say is, like, look at the other professional obligations that are in place. What are those types of obligations, and does the salary and remuneration match those obligations? And the majority of the time in women's football, the answer to that is no. It doesn't actually match what the players are being obliged to do. And that's where a little bit of the friction and complication and lack of sustainable development takes place in the professional game, because it's not quite matching the demands and the obligations of the players themselves. So it's hugely important. And that's why it's not always helpful to just focus on a particular figure, because player conditions, player salary, it's so much more than just what they're receiving in their bank account on the 23rd of every month, for example. So it's just not something that I would say we should look at in isolation. It's part of that whole piece, and the other women on the call can attest to that. You know, when we're talking about raising standards and elevating conditions, there isn't a magic bullet, right? It's not one size fits all. We have to really hone in on the social, the cultural context of the football for women in that country.
And the equal pay, hugely contentious. I know you won't beat around the bush, Sarah. Come on.
I really don't, but I also am never one to say that equal pay is also something that we look at in isolation. It's hugely important, but and maybe my point of view can be very simple, considering I represent players. Whether or not that wealth gets redistributed to the players is often sometimes the problem, because it doesn't matter how much the prize money is, from my point of view, if it's not reaching the players, if it's not actually making an impact on whether or not they can have full-time employment in the sport, I'm really not that bothered about what the number is. My point of view is, like, can we make sure that there are like sustainable player payments as part of that prize money structure? So yeah, I mean, maybe it's not the sexy answer that you want of like chanting equal pay and things like that, but my point of view is that it's a lot more, sometimes it's a lot more nuanced, and what I want to make sure is that there is adequate redistribution of revenue down to the players themselves, because at the end of the day, if you're talking about prize money, the ones that are earning it are the ones that are on the pitch, but what we actually see is they're not always the ones that benefit from the prize money anyway, regardless of what the number is. So yeah, maybe my point of view doesn't have to be as balanced as maybe the other women on the call, because they have so many other things that they have to consider in that discussion. But for me, it's also like, wow, are the other players actually seeing part of this prize money? Because if they're not, that needs to be the starting point of the conversation before we talk about the figure.
Sarai, Nadine, do you want to weigh in on the salary? I've got some other questions. If not, I can see a smile.
Let me go first, Nadine. I'll take the bullet on this one. No, but certainly, Sarah, absolutely, I agree with you. I think it's not something that can be looked at in isolation. You know, the conditions surrounding a player is so much more than just the remuneration. And I guess I have to say up front that I would never stand in the way of a woman who is seeking something that she believes that she is worth, and that what she is valued for. And, you know, a big part of that is being remunerated well. And I actually applaud those women that are using their platform and their voice to raise awareness around the issues of inequality and things like pay. I think it's an amazing thing. And I think football provides an incredible platform for those discussions to have, you know, to really take place with a wide audience. But yeah, certainly it's not something that we can look at in isolation. And I think Sarah's right. You know, before we start talking about numbers, when we talk about equal pay, it really comes down to the players. You know, and if they're central to the discussion, and they are receiving a part of that prize money, as they so rightly should, you know, that is a very good starting point for this discussion. But it's certainly a big topic in the women's game, as it should be. It's not something that I think we should hide from. It's something that we need to engage in and discuss and look at how we can find solutions. Over to you, Nadine.
Well, I can only echo both of you. I think a portion absolutely should go to players. They're the main actors. Nevertheless, there's also a lot of stuff to be considered around the team, so the team works. And I think, but it's within their right to of course also discuss and negotiate at the end of the day what goes back to the players. Nevertheless, in context of the whole prize money discussion, I think we also need to bear in mind that we now look more also to Sarai, like have a responsibility of also thinking of how we can grow the game on all levels, from all kind of perspectives, from that little girl that doesn't have an opportunity on the ground to that very, very elitist player that plays the World Cup. And we need to also consider this, I guess, you know, from a symbolic point of view, from a, you know, perception point of view, prize money is a very important topic. But on the other hand side, we also have responsibilities to responsibilities to invest into other areas of the game. And all of this together, I think, is really important, that we start focusing more on commercializing the women's game, and also start thinking a little bit more from a business perspective, and start aiming to really, you know, give the game the visibility it needs, give the game the sponsors it needs, give the game its own commercial value. And I think then with this, we're much more better positioned to also, you know, further enhance conversations around prize money.
I think on the commercialization point, you know, do we need to package women's football as a different product? And can you share with us, Nadine, your vision for the UEFA Women's Champion League? I think that leads really nicely into a quick clip from highlighting the UCWL, if we can show that. And maybe before we do that, if you could give your giveaway question for the Barcelona kit.
So yes, I have a very exciting, I show it to you here, pink Barcelona kit from one of their top players, signed by Hansen. So our this year's Women's Champions League winner, a fantastic match they performed. And the question for you is, who was the player of the match? And was it maybe either Caroline Hansen or Aitana Bonmati or Vicky Lozada? So,
fantastic. Brilliant. Thanks for the questions. Send your answers to the live chat. In the meantime, let's go to a clip of the UEFA Women's Champions League, and then Nadine will share with us her vision. Fantastic. Nadine, tell us your vision of the future for women's football. How do we commercialise it? Do we need the same sponsors as the men's game? Is it a chance to create a new safe space for them?
A very good question, a very complex question, Katie. And I guess the question is for everyone involved where to start, where's the starting point, chicken or egg? I mean, it's really, I think for us, we focused 3 years ago on actually separating the sponsorship rights from the men's, because it was one very important objective of ours to say, no, women's football has a value on its own. We want to prove this. There are investments that need to be made. Sponsors to be found that are just interested in the women's in the past, and that's, I think I speak for most organizations in the world. Sponsorship rights were bundled with the men's, and I'd like to say that maybe in a bit of an easygoing way, but it often gives the right value to the women's game, and for sure not monetary value. So in order to really change that perception, we went out with a completely different model with our own partners program and separated sponsorship rights. The media rights have been separated for a while, and I think with that approach, we really also wanted to ensure that is exclusivity for women's football being granted, and therefore also a foundation made to give the game a chance to commercialize, to just, you know, generate more revenues that can be also reinvested in the game whilst enhancing the for it. I think for the future, my personal vision, the vision of our organization is to further continue the road. It's going tremendously well. I know we go through difficult times. COVID hasn't been an easy, absolutely not. As a competition organizer, I can tell you stories, but I will not do that. Otherwise, we'll sit until tomorrow morning. But from a commercial perspective, I'm super excited and proud to say that the interest is not stopping. It's rather the other way around, because sponsors, partners these days really, media rights partners really have their reason why they want to go into women's sports, why they want to partner, particularly with women's competitions or women's football programs. So it is another asset for an organization. It's another way of getting partners on board that might be different than the partners we have for men's football. So in our case, we have partners that are the same as for our men's competitions, but we also attracted at the same time for the first time new partners for an organization like UEFA. And I think that's a healthy balance, a healthy competition. And I also think that's what the game needs to further grow and to have also a greater chance, you know, in terms of sustainability and really to, whilst asking for more investment from the men's game, also start, you know, to stand on our own feet.
Thanks, Nadine. Sarai, I was at the Women's World Cup in France back in 2019, in the good old days before COVID, and it was absolutely electrifying, the atmosphere. It was incredible. You really did think that there was going to be this turning point around the corner. We could almost grasp it for women's football. Obviously, we've talked about the COVID-19 and that stopping its tracks. Are you seeing the growth and the prospects of the future of women's football standing on its own right in the not so distant future, financially sustainable without support from the men's game?
Look, I think there's certainly a case for the women's game to be seen as a real commercial prospect, 100%. You know, we've seen that already evidenced through what UEFA has done with the Women's Champions League. You know, the benchmarking report that we were speaking about earlier, there's some data from there that points to the fact that unbundling the women's game from the men's game in terms of sponsorship rights, you know, generates more revenue for those clubs. So I think 82% of the leagues that we surveyed for their clubs that were selling the sponsorship rights for the women's team separately were generating higher revenues than those that were bundling it. So this is a discussion that's been in and around women's football for some time now, and we are slowly starting to see through the example of UEFA and through the data that we've been able to gather through the benchmarking report that it really is a feasible direction to go in. I'm quite excited to say that in 2023 for the Women's World Cup, it's a new commercial cycle for FIFA. We will also be unbundling the sponsorship rights. Of course, we do have some really dedicated and loyal long-term partners that will still be involved, but it means that we will be able to speak to sponsors, to organisations and partners that want to be specifically involved in the women's game. And I think many do. You know, the discussions that we're having already clearly indicate to us that there is a clear interest for organisations to invest specifically in women's football. You know, our game, and we saw this in France, it's not only about what happens on the pitch. We have some incredible athletes and role models that can be used and can really, we can also support them to raise their profiles. But just what happens in and around the game as well. There's something about the women's game that is beautiful. It has these qualities that I would like to say are very unique. You know, there's still a lot of integrity that exists in women's football, and the way that we carry ourselves, our athletes as well, that really shines through, you know, on and off the pitch. And there are many organizations that want to align, you know, with those qualities. So I think it's a clear direction for us in the future. The Women's World Cup in 2023 is going to be a massive catalyst for FIFA in that respect. And obviously at the global level, if we can unlock the commercial value of the women's game, it can only be good for the entire structure of women's football.
And with that, I think let's just lead to the awesome FIFA Women's World Cup 2023 video.
E o futebol feminino depende de vocês.
Sarah, in the video, we saw one of the players saying, women's football depends on you. That's Sarah Fief Pro. So if we could get Sarah up. How would you answer the question to say that football shouldn't receive the income from the men's game if it depends on all of us?
Well, I mean, we have to be very honest about the fact that the dependency has to remain, because like Nadine and Soraya already touched on, there's been no autonomy for women's football and the women's football industry to realize and create its own value, because it has for so long been attached to the men's football industry. So I think it's not actually fair to approach it from that point of view, because actually it hasn't been able to exist as a standalone. It has always been attached. And so it's probably a little bit unfair to have that as the starting point. But I feel like we're just on sort of like the cusp of actually being able to realize its value moving forward. And so I think potentially maybe that question comes about a decade too early. Like, let's get through a couple of independent Women's World Cups. Let's get through a couple of like competition cycles in the UEFA Women's Champions League where it has existed as its own autonomous independent entity before we start asking about where the revenue and the funding and the resource needs to come from in order to continue on with the momentum. So maybe it's not quite the answer that the person asking the question was necessarily looking for, but I just don't think it's that clear, because we haven't actually given the industry a chance to stand on its own 2 feet yet.
And are facilities for professional women's football fit for purpose in 2021?
Oh, you're going to really hate me for saying this, but it depends on where you're talking about, right? Like, I think universally it's probably enough to say that by and large, the facilities available to elite women's footballers aren't always elite, right? We know that there's a struggle for access. We know that there's a struggle for really purpose-built facilities. You can count on one hand, I think, really the clubs and the organizations that have really put time and effort and energy into building a standalone fit for purpose women's football specific facility, right? But it's not for lack of facilities. It's not as if we're like crying out for elite facilities generally in football. There's a lot of them. They just struggle sometimes to open their doors to female players. And so that access is a bit the problem. So my belief is obviously that if you're an elite player, you need to have an elite environment around you, and facilities plays a huge role in that. But sometimes very, very real barriers are put in place in terms of access. Facilities are there. Sometimes access is the problem. And I think that's probably the way you have to look at it, because some places do it really well. Some doors are really open and some are firmly shut with chains wrapped around them and bolts and things like that to really kind of not allow women's footballers to receive the conditions and the facilities that they deserve.
Thank you, Sarah. I'd like, Sarah, if you can just give the giveaway question so I don't run out of time, because it's such an amazing gift. It's the Real Madrid men's team shirt.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so this is actually a signed shirt from Kaká, who I met for the first time at the draw for the Women's World Cup in 2019. He was one of our draw assistants, and he is a massive supporter of the women's game. So he has signed a Real Madrid shirt for us. And the question will be, can you name 3 of the 9 host cities that have been announced for the Women's World Cup in 2023? So New Zealand and Australia are hosting. Name 3 of the host cities that have been announced.
Amazing. I'm loving these brain teasers as part of the WOW show. Moving on to recent current events. Nadine, what were the implications of the European Super League on the women's game from UEFA's perspective? You wrote a powerful open letter on this subject, which I'm really keen to hear about. And it seemed to me, was it a case of men dictating the future of women's football without consulting you, who's running it? For UEFA?
Well, I think, you know, I'm not running it, first of all. We all run it together, but you head into the right direction, Katie. I guess it was just my first rationale to actually have an opinion on this was because we were literally also mentioned in the same context, whilst we weren't given enough thought. At least that's how I felt. You know, we had over the past 3 years the same discussions as there were on the men's side for the reformatting of the Women's Champions League. We have reformatted this competition in absolute consultation with all stakeholders. We're about so many meetings that I can't count, starting from sporting formats to commercial concepts to regulatory frameworks to you know, how to give the competition the visibility it needs, brand, everything, because we really wanted to come up with a strong package, which I believe we do now for next season. So it took us quite, also myself, by surprise to read about a potential Women's Super League if it works well in the men's. So I think you hear a little bit still my opinion on it. I think, you know, it's really important for me that to get the message across, that to have given the message to the world that, you know, it also concerns women's football if such topics are being discussed for the men's game, because it was not just a topic, men's Champions League versus Super League. It was a topic that was, you know, concerning the system we all belong to. So also women's football belongs to, and you know, my intention wasn't really to put my opinion into other people's mind, but rather to have also encourage them to have an opinion on this topic. And of course, also from a sporting merit perspective, which I'm a strong supporter of. I guess there are many clubs in women's football countries that have shaped European women's football. And I can absolutely, of course, not support any kind of competition that doesn't take into account what happened on the pitch on all of these years before, and for sure not a competition that doesn't leave the dream open for for any club in Europe to win it, particularly also clubs that might be a bit smaller or middle-sized clubs to have this dream of winning the most prestigious club trophy for women's football. So therefore, yeah, I felt the need to say something.
Yeah, brilliant leadership on that. So congratulations. I want to bring Sarai at FIFA back into the conversation. SIGA's instigating good governance in sport, including gender equity, and we're bringing accountability to global sport through an independent rating system that will audit sports governance in accordance with our universal standards on sport integrity. Do you think that this presents an opportunity for women's football to lead the way in terms of good governance? I see from the report there was a lot of governance points picked up, and potentially maybe women's football can be even better governed than men because we haven't got a blank piece of paper. Is there an opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. I think governance is so important when it comes to women's football because, you know, all the investment that we make in terms of development, all the efforts that we put in on the pitch can only be supported and sustainable if we have good governance structures in place. And that is really, really key at every level, you know, clubs, leagues, member associations, confederations, and FIFA ultimately as well. So good governance is a really, really important topic, and there are huge opportunities in the women's game and in football in general. You know, just speaking about, you know, seeing more women in positions of leadership and decision-making roles within football more widely. We've seen that that is something that is growing rapidly. We need to see more, I think. You know, it's great to be on a call with some amazing women today who are involved at the highest level in football. But let's be clear, this needs to be happening at every level, right throughout the structures, right down to club level. It needs to become the norm. You know, we shouldn't see big announcements when women are appointed to positions of leadership. It should just be a normal thing that is taking place within the game. So definitely an opportunity for sure. And I always like to think that women's football can be leading in that respect.
I agree with you. So time's flying, and it's really, I'm going to bring in some video questions from our community, which is the career tips section. The first one is from Megan Mackey. She's footballer for the Republic of Ireland and Lewes FC, which are in the WSL Championship. And she's also, very impressively, a Harvard student athlete. Can we have Megan's question for the panel?
Hi everyone, my name's Megan Mackey. I'm currently in the UK. I go to school in America at Harvard University. I'm also a member of the Harvard women's soccer team, and I've played for the Republic of Ireland at underage levels. I'm currently an intern. I coach across the continent, specifically in their Step Up program, which helps gain professional skills whilst playing your sport. And my question for Nadine and Sarah is, how do you prepare yourself for that transition out of your football or sport career? And do you have any advice for people at the moment who are going through that? Thanks.
Can I just quickly say that you're on a really good pathway with that kind of CV already? That's unbelievable. Like, that is something else. And I think it maybe touches on the fact that, and I don't want to speak, I can only speak from my own experience. I don't know if Nadine was similar, but I don't know if you can actually fully prepare for your football career to come to an end, because it like kind of sucks when it does wind down. And I think for her and I, we've had the opportunity to stay so heavily involved in the game and give back a little bit. I know a lot of players feel that real desire to give back to the sport that's given them so much. I think preparing for that moment is, you can do everything that you can and put all of the different things in place, but it still takes you by surprise. And for me, it actually took me in a direction that I didn't necessarily plan or prepare for. FIFA Pro shoulder tapped me, and that was a very interesting experience in itself, because then all of a sudden I had to make decisions not only on where I wanted my career to go, but I had to up sticks from Wellington, New Zealand to Amsterdam in the Netherlands. So it's pretty challenging, but I think like what you can do, and what I kind of did as well, is when that time starts to approach, and you know, sometimes there is a bit of a shelf life in terms of age and what your body can maintain, you just start saying yes to things. Get yourself prepared mentally, get yourself prepared in terms of like what you can do to grow your network, and just kind of see what happens. That was a bit my experience. And I don't know, Nadine, if you have something different to offer, but it sounds like if you're going to Harvard University, you're probably a step ahead of some of your peers anyway.
Thank you, Sarah. Nadine, any nuggets of wisdom, I'm sure?
I absolutely agree with Sarah that, you know, you can't absolutely prepare, can't really be ready exactly for this moment. You're never going to be fully ready. But I'm also German, so I like preparing, right? And I would always, no matter how professional the game gets, how much money that there is available, like, educate yourself, prepare yourself, go and do university, do other things that you don't feel like are overburdening you for your professional playing career. Open your doors. Sometimes you need to open doors way before you actually go through them. That was for me. My career ending was really, let's say, a bit ad hoc. I was at the top of my game, and won the best player in the world award, and I had to stop. So to get out of this was kind of a bit a shock, and it took me also a little while to get back on my feet. But I think then to proactively open those doors and try out. You have to try out a lot, because next life is quite different than to your life before. However, you know, whilst trying out, you don't go in there completely with little confidence just because it's a new thing. I would do one thing differently now, looking 4 years back in time. I was way too insecure when I entered this place. When I entered UEFA, I was way too full of self-doubt on you know, who I am and what I can transfer from my playing times. Skills you learn in a team, particularly if you lead teams or you're good in communicating, solving conflicts. All of these things are so valuable for your next life. And you have absolutely an advantage also over people that are not coming out of a team sport. The stuff you have to learn is really the knowledge, the expertise for that specific area. But I think, Megan, looking at your CV and everything you were up to and have done, then I think you were better prepared than a German. And you are right straight away on the right track. But most importantly, really keep going, keep believing in yourself, and take your destiny in your own hands.
Thank you. I think the self-belief there is something which, as women, we need to do more of. We always doubt ourselves, and this is all what the WOW platform is about, is to believe in yourself. I've got questions coming in fast. One's from John through the SoccerX Connected platform, where we're also being broadcast live. What lessons can the women's game take from tennis and its approach to equal prize money across men and women's sports? I'm not a tennis expert, but if perhaps somebody else is in the room. If not, I've got another video question.
Hello,
Maybe I can
my
take
name is
this
Taylor
one.
Green, and I'm a proud SIGAWOMEN mentee. My question for the panel are: what initiatives are taking place in your respective sport organizations to ensure that sport integrity is synonymous with diversity, equity, and inclusion in sport? Thank you.
That was from Taylor. So Sarah, you're going to answer both questions now, one on tennis, and what is FIFA doing to ensure greater diversity and inclusion in sport? Thank you, Taylor. Shout out to you.
Awesome question, Taylor. Look, with respect to the first question, I'm not an expert in tennis either, but I think that, you know, when you're at this level in the game and you're making key decisions that will impact future generations, we have to look to other sports and good examples that are happening in other industries. You know, we don't do everything perfect. Everyone is human within this game at every level. Ultimately, it's humans that are involved in these organizations. And it's important to look around us and see best practice and case studies like tennis, like other sports, you know, like other industries. So certainly I think there are some lessons to be learned, and I believe that, you know, that's something that we should openly look at and not shy away from. Can you remind me of the second question, Katie, from Taylor?
Yeah, the second question from Taylor is, what is FIFA doing to promote more more diversity and inclusion in the organisation?
Yeah, okay. Very, very good question. I mean, diversity goes far beyond gender, right? It's not just about males and females. It's also about, you know, ethnicity, religious backgrounds, you know, sexual preferences, all those kinds of things. And I guess the number one thing that we recognize and know within FIFA is that when you have a diverse group of people behind something, and particularly around decision making, it certainly leads to more successful and better decision making processes. So we have enshrined, specifically in regards to the women's game and bringing more women in, we have enshrined some clauses within our statutes to ensure that women are represented at the highest levels. You know, we have women now at the council level, which is the decision-making body at an executive level for FIFA. We want to see a minimum of 1/3 of our standing committee members being female. We want all of our 211 member associations to have minimum representation of women at their executive levels as well. And this is something that we're not just pushing through regulations, but also through programs. So we run a program, for example, jointly with UEFA, Nadine and her team, which is a leadership program for executives that are looking to progress in the women's game. It's something that's very successful. I myself has been a graduate of this course. It really was a life changer for me. So it's about, yeah, I would say a two-pronged approach, you know, top down through the regulatory framework that we have, and bottom up through programs like the leadership program, you know, creating networks, mentoring. And I think with those things combined, we really will start to see a more diverse group of people running our game.
Thank you, Sarah. Great to hear all the brilliant work that's been doing by FIFA at the moment to increase diversity and inclusion. We're going to go to our final video question, which is from Adelaja Milovanovic. I practiced her surname earlier. It's a tough one. She's a member of the SIGA Youth Council, and she is my SIGA Instagram queen. She helps us on the Instagram. Over to Adelaja.
Hello, my name is Angelia Milovanovic, and I'm Sports Integrity Global Alliance Youth Council member. And I have a question for Sarah. When we see that male footballers are having big problems with their careers and violating their human rights, how can we motivate girls to participate in the football, to build career in the football industry, when we know that they are facing with greater challenges and discrimination in the male-dominated sports? Thank you.
That was for Sarah.
Oh, it's a great question. They've all been really good questions. Yeah, I'm a huge believer in actually the industry and the governing bodies really taking a very firm stance on industry safeguards and protections for those that participate in the game. It's hugely important, and that those safeguards are obviously independent in the way that there is oversight and in the way that people who are affected by discrimination of any sort can seek remedy and can seek justice for what they've experienced. So I think that it's very difficult, but I think one thing that football does and has to its advantage is it's a very fun and attractive sport to play. I think it's never going to have a problem like bringing young girls into the game. It's just making sure that that experience in the game is a very positive one. And unfortunately, we've seen, like, particularly at the extreme ends, what it looks like when girls and women are discriminated against and how absolutely devastating that can be. So it's a huge responsibility for the governing bodies and the institutions and those that govern the sport and can provide those systems and those structures, that actually the perspective of the young girl entering the sport is considered, right? And that the system and the structure has her at the heart of it, so that when she goes and uses the system and is within the structure, she's having the best experience that she can. And obviously not at the other end of the scale where it's completely detrimental and devastating to her life and her livelihood. So there's just such a massive responsibility. And I think the perception of the sport is so positive, and it is so, I think, accessible for so many people, that responsibility is even higher, right? It's not as if it's a sport for just the few, it's a sport for the many, it's for everybody. And so everybody within the sport is completely within their rights, their human rights, to have everything upheld and respected to make sure that their experience in the game is a positive one. So that's a huge responsibility. And I think I don't like speaking on behalf of other women, but I'm sure that Soraya and Nadine feel that acutely in their roles as well, that they have a tremendous responsibility alongside organizations like FIFPro to make sure that the environment around the players is first of all safe. It just needs to be safe, and then within that they can flourish and have a very positive experience. So it's a tough one, because I think you never want to have anybody feel that something that you help to provide and help to build and help to supply is actually not a safe experience for them. So I'm sure that we all feel that responsibility heavily on our shoulders. And I think because we've come through grassroots, and Nadine and I have had experiences at the other end of the game, at the higher end as well, we know that every step along the way has to be protected. And we now have a role, having experienced the sport at different levels, to make sure that our experiences, what we've seen, what we can know and identify in terms of fragilities or weaknesses, that we do everything that we can in our roles to plug those gaps and make sure that everyone that comes along with us has the type of positive experiences that we've been able to share within the sport.
Thank you, Sarah. And I think that leads really nicely onto the need of having champions for sport integrity, mentors along the way. And we have at SIGA an ambassador program. It's called the SIGA Champion Program, and every month during the WOW Show I will be promoting and celebrate current and former athletes, and given that this episode is dedicated to football, I'm so excited to announce Chloe Morgan. She's the football goalkeeper who plays for the FA Women's Championship club Crystal Palace. But more than that, if there's more, she's a lawyer, she's a keeper, she's a coach, and she's looking to break down barriers in the game on and off the field. Chloe, you've made a special guest appearance. Thank you for being our new SIGA champion. Have you got a few words for us all?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that introduction, first off. No, and thank you so much for making me the SIGA champion. I really do appreciate it. And I absolutely love everything that's being stood for. And I was just listening in on some of the discussions, and I think it resonated with me on a massive scale as a player at the moment, sort of coming towards the end of my playing career. And I think I am now looking to sort of do more and step into a situation where actually I'm in a position that I can actually make decisions and take the game forward, so that we're not still having the same discussions in 10, 15 years time. And the girls that are coming through into football are not facing the same kind of barriers and discrimination and disadvantages that some of the players that we experience now, and players before us have experienced. So yeah, I just think everything that's been said was beautifully worded and just really resonated with me. So it's been a fantastic 15 minutes just tuning into the conversation.
Thank you, Chloe, and we'll be seeing more of you soon. I know you've got a new business venture, so excited to hear about that. And I think that just shows that women and women footballers, they need to be proficient both on and off the field, because of the current pay situation. They can't rely on that after their career. So in some ways, I guess we're more talented. Probably going to get shot for that comment. We've got a second champion to announce. She couldn't make a guest appearance live, but she will be joining us via video now. Her name is Kyla Showman, and she's a professional. She was a former professional footballer with 10 years of international playing experience, and she recently retired and is now working for a global non-profit organization called Coaches Across Continents. And we're going to be collaborating with them, and Kyla is going to be ensuring that some of the former athletes join the SIGA mentorship program. So we've got a special quick video message from Kyla before we wrap up for the day.
My name is Kyla Showman, and I'm a SIGA champion. I signed with SIGA because I believe in creating safe, equal, and inclusive environments in sport.
She said it all. What else is there left to say? There is one more monthly feature that I would like to celebrate. This is the Man of the Month. We cannot do our job. We cannot champion women leadership without men. We need to bring you on board. Last month, I started the ball rolling. I nominated the SIGA Global CEO, Emmanuel Macedo de Medeiros, and I'm absolutely thrilled that Jackie Traynor, who works at British Rowing, she's on our mentorship program, she nominated Andy Parkinson, CEO of British Rowing, And we've got a quick, yeah, there's Andy there, and we've got a quick video of why she nominated him as her male champion of the month.
Hi, my name's Jackie Trainer, and for SIGA Male Champion, I nominated Andy Parkinson, Chief Executive Officer of British Rowing. The reason I nominated Andy is because for me personally, he's been incredibly supportive and acted as a guide towards my own ambitions for leadership in sport. I feel so grateful to him, and I also feel very privileged to work in an organisation where women are very much part of leadership. So thank you, Andy.
Fantastic, awesome. And soon the male champions of the month will be getting their WOW t-shirts so they can wear the shirt for gender equity. Now, before I close up, I'm going to announce the winners of our giveaway questions. We've had loads of responses. The winner of the SoccerX Connected Delegate Pass is Elena Gonzalez. That pass will be sent to you shortly from SoccerX. Thank you. The shirt winner for the Barcelona kit is Grisha Catalan, who's from Ohio State University. So that just shows the breadth of this show. Shout out to you, Grisha. And the winner of the Real Madrid Kaka shirt winner is Abby Barry. So awesome. We've got 3 winners, and thank you. But from 3 winners to 3 leaders, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Sarai, Sarah and Nadine for featuring on the 2nd episode of SIGA WOW. You are spearheading women's football, and we at SIGA and our community cannot wait to catapult it into what can only be described as an incredibly successful future. All it leaves is for me is to say thank you, goodbye, and stay tuned for next month's 3rd episode of SIGA WOW, 7th of July. SIGA, see you there from SIGA. Prepare to be wowed.